I never signed up for any of this. That was the message I saw. Just 5 words beneath a screenshot of our shared account showing zero balance. I'm Jack, 32, a mechanic at Bennett's Auto in Portland. Just hours earlier, I'd been sitting in a doctor's office, hearing words like cancer, treatment plans, and chances of survival. Stage 2. It's treatable, but the road ahead is long and uncertain. I called Sarah from the parking lot, told her to meet me at home so we could talk. She said she had things to do, errands to run, and would be back later. When I arrived, half the closet was cleared out. Her bag was gone, and the wedding photo from the nightstand was missing. Then came the text, along with the screenshot showing she'd transferred our entire savings, $35,000 we'd saved up over 4 years, to an account that only had her name on it. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed 2 words. Good luck. After that, I put my phone down, cracked open a cold beer, and sat on the porch watching the sky fade to dusk. No tears. I didn't throw anything. Just sat there, feeling the weight of it all settle in. The cancer? I could handle that. But the betrayal? That was something entirely different. Tim from next door spotted me sitting out there and came over to the fence. Everything okay? Saw Rachel driving off earlier, her car packed up. Got some health news, I replied. She didn't take it well. Tim nodded, not pushing for more details. Let me know if you need anything. Sarah makes a killer casserole. Thanks, I said. After he left, I went inside and grabbed the folder my Uncle Rick had handed me last month. He'd retired from estate planning last year, but still kept a few clients. When my grandfather passed away in March and left me that small plot of land upstate, Rick had helped me sort out the paperwork. Everyone needs to have their affairs in order, he'd told me, especially when you're married. Protect one another. I'd started the process. Updated my will. Listed Rachel as co-owner of the '68 Camaro I'd restored, though I hadn't filed the final paperwork yet. I hadn't completed the paperwork with the DMV yet. I'd set up a secondary account at a different bank for the land sale proceeds once that went through. All of it to protect us, to protect her. Funny how things turn out. I picked up my phone and dialed Rick. When he picked up, I said, "Remember that conversation we had about estate planning? I need to make some adjustments." There was a brief silence. "Everything all right, Jack?" "No," I replied, "but it will be." I met Rachel at my friend Chris's wedding in 2017. She was a paralegal at a firm downtown. Sharp, quick-witted, stunning. We moved in together 6 months later, married the following year. The first few years were great. We saved for a house, found a fixer-upper in a good neighborhood. I spent weekends replacing cabinets, refinishing floors, installing new plumbing. Rachel chose paint colors and furniture. Posted before and after pictures online. Called us a renovation success story. My dad passed when I was 11. Mum raised me and my younger brother on a teacher's salary. She taught us to work hard, live within our means, and always have a backup plan. After Mum passed away a year ago, that backup plan became even more crucial to me. Rachel came from a different background. Her parents provided her with everything. College tuition, a new car every few years, the down payment for our house. They never understood why she married a mechanic. Her dad, a corporate attorney, always referred to me as Rachel's husband, instead of using my name. Looking back, I realized the cracks had begun to form long before my diagnosis. 3 months ago, Rachel started talking about moving to New York. She said there were better prospects there. I resisted. It was a good job. We had a strong network of friends here, and the house was nearly paid off. She grew quiet after those talks. Distant. Spent more time with people I didn't know. Then came the small comments that stung more than they should have. Don't you want more out of life than just fixing cars? My college roommate's husband just made senior partner at his firm. They're building a beach house. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake not moving to Boston after graduation instead of staying here. I ignored the warning signs, told myself that every marriage goes through rough patches and we'd work through it. When I found a business card for an apartment complex in New York tucked away in her purse, I still didn't confront her. I just quietly called my Uncle Rick to discuss updating our legal paperwork. Started documenting our assets, just in case. 2 weeks later, I went to the doctor, thinking it was just a lingering cold. That's when I found the swollen lymph nodes. Then came the blood tests, the biopsy. The night before my final diagnosis, Rachel and I had dinner at the kitchen table. She talked about a colleague's promotion. I studied her face, wondering if she'd see the fear in mine. "Everything okay?" she finally asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." She nodded and kept eating. Didn't push further. Didn't really look at me. That should have told me everything I needed to know. 3 days after Rachel left, I started chemotherapy. The first session hit me harder than I anticipated. The nurse led me to a recliner, hooked up the IV, and asked if my ride was in the waiting room. "Took an Uber," I replied. "My wife's out of town." She gave me a look I couldn't quite place, then patted my arm. "First one's the hardest. You'll get through it." I nodded, unable to trust myself to speak. I hadn't told anyone except Tim next door that Rachel was gone for good, not just out of town. Somehow, saying it aloud would make it all more real, more shameful. When I got home, there was a casserole on my front porch with a note from Tim's wife. "Made too much? Enjoy." I knew it was a lie, but I appreciated it nonetheless. I tried to eat, but couldn't keep anything down. Ended up on the bathroom floor, sweating and shaking. Alone. That night, I called my sister Ava in Seattle. Told her everything. The cancer, Rachel, the money. She wanted to drive up immediately. I asked her to wait. Needed to sort a few things first. The next morning, I called my bank. That's when I found out Rachel had emptied our accounts 40 minutes after I called her from the doctor's office, before she even knew the details. Just knew I was sick, and that was enough for her to run. Something shifted inside me. The sadness didn't disappear, but it solidified, hardened into something else. Not quite anger, purpose. That afternoon, I drove to my Uncle Brian's house with a box full of paperwork. Financial records, property deeds, everything we'd built and saved. "She can't just take your money like that," he said, flipping through the statements. "It was a joint account," I reminded him. "Her name's on it too." Brian took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Logan, what she did wasn't just cold. It might have been illegal. Taking everything when she knew you were sick, when she knew you'd have medical bills. Can I prove she knew?" He paused, thought. "Phone records will show you called her right after your appointment. The bank statement timestamps the transfer. If you have documentation of the diagnosis..." I pulled up the message she sent. Just 5 words. I didn't sign up for this. Brian's jaw clenched. That's pretty damning. For the next 3 hours, we built a plan. Not just legally, but personally. Reviewed the Mustang title, still in my name, thankfully. Looked at the secondary account I'd started for the land proceeds. Talked about next steps, how to protect what was left. For the first time since the diagnosis, I felt like I was reclaiming something. He read it twice, then let out a low whistle. "She really thinks she can walk away clean," he muttered. "Take the money, abandon you during treatment, and still ask for half the house." "She's already got half," I said quietly. "More than half, really." Brian shook his head. "We're not going to let her get away with this." He started drafting a formal response, one that didn't just deny her demands, but documented everything. The medical records, the bank statements, the timeline, her message. We didn't go for revenge, just truth, evidence, fairness. Over the next week, I gathered everything we needed. Called my doctor for written confirmation of my diagnosis and treatment plan. Contacted the bank and got exact timestamps of the withdrawal. Printed phone logs, backed up messages. Meanwhile, the chemo got harder. The days blurred together. Nausea, fatigue, moments of quiet where I wondered what part of myself I'd lose next. But in those moments, I also felt something else growing. Resolve. It wasn't just about money or betrayal. It was about reclaiming what remained of my life, my dignity, my choices, the version of me that had taken a back seat while trying to hold a marriage together that had already broken. A few nights later, I was on the back porch when Tim came over with 2 beers. "Don't worry," he said, handing me a bottle. I checked, no dairy or gluten. Lisa looked it up. I smiled for the first time in days. "Thanks, man." We sat in silence for a while, the crickets filling in the spaces where words weren't needed. "You're gonna get through this," he said, finally. "I know," I said, and I meant it. Brian read the new letter, while Ellie stood behind him, arms folded tightly across her chest. "This is disgusting," she said. "She walks out, drains your accounts, and still wants to act like you're the bad guy." Brian set the letter down with a sigh. "They're bluffing, trying to pressure you into settling fast, but they're sloppy. No mention of the withdrawal, no acknowledgement of your diagnosis. That won't look good in court." Ellie stepped forward. "Then let's take it to court." Brian gave her a small smile. "We will. But first, we make sure we're airtight. We'll send a response soon, just enough to show we're not intimidated, but not tipping our full hand." That night, after Ellie went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table. Same spot where Vanessa had once planned paint swatches and pinned renovation ideas. I pulled out a notepad and wrote a letter. Not to her, not to her lawyer, but to myself. A line in ink that marked the boundary between who I had been and who I had to become. The man who loved her was gone. The man she left behind was fighting now, not just for his life, but for his dignity. And he wasn't backing down. By the end of the day, I was exhausted, but lighter somehow. Like I'd started pulling bricks off my chest one by one. Brian filed the paperwork for the land sale transfer that same week, placing it in a trust under my name. He also connected me with a friend who specialized in contested divorces and marital asset fraud. We built a timeline, doctor's visits, calls to Vanessa, bank withdrawals, her texts. Every detail that showed premeditation and abandonment. Ellie helped me write a statement about the emotional toll, about the nights alone on the bathroom floor, the silence from someone who once vowed to love me in sickness and in health. A few days later, Vanessa's lawyer called Brian's office. The tone had changed. Less demand, more seeking an amicable resolution. Brian just smirked when he hung up. "They're starting to realize what this is going to look like in court." "What now?" I asked. "Now," he said, "now we keep the pressure on." 2 days later, Vanessa's lawyer sent a letter, this time referencing known upcoming asset liquidations and demanding a percentage of all financial instruments or land sales in process. Brian just laughed when he read it. There it is. Proof they're monitoring you, and jumping at bait we never cast. We filed a formal complaint with the DMV and the bank, citing unauthorized information leaks and requesting internal investigations. Brian's contact at the state attorney's office agreed to look into it quietly. Meanwhile, I kept playing the part, making loud phone calls in public, accidentally, leaving emails open on shared accounts Vanessa hadn't logged out of. I even typed a fake message draft about selling the Mustang to a collector in Arizona and left it unsent, just sitting there. Sure enough, another letter came. "We are aware of your intent to sell jointly held property." More threats, more entitlement. But now we had dates, patterns, evidence. "Time to go on offense," Brian said. Should Logan take the case public or keep building in silence for a surprise legal takedown? I sat there, phone in hand, staring at nothing. $30,000 to her parents? Gifted, Brian confirmed. Labeled it a loan on the memo line, but there's no promissory note, no paper trail, just gone. That was supposed to cover chemo, the house payment. "I know," he said gently, "but it also proves intent. She knew you were sick, she took the money, and she funneled it out of reach." We filed a motion the next day. Fraudulent transfer claim. Emergency hearing to freeze her remaining assets. Brian attached the text, the timeline, and the bank documents. Our case was no longer about divorce. It was about recovery. Justice. That night, as rain ticked softly against the windows, I sat at the kitchen table, alone again, but not broken. The pain in my body was familiar now, but the heaviness in my chest had lifted slightly. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. He flinched when he saw me, like he hadn't expected I'd confront him. He rolled the window down halfway. "Logan," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Just checking in. Wanted to see how you were doing." I laughed. A dry, tired sound. "You mean you wanted to see if I looked weak enough to back off?" He didn't respond. "I know about the check," I said. "The 30 grand Vanessa gave you." His face tightened. "That's between me and my daughter." "No," I said firmly. "That's between the courts and your daughter now." He looked away, suddenly very interested in the steering wheel. "Tell her," I continued, "this ends one of two ways. Either she returns the money and walks with whatever dignity she has left, or we go to court and expose everything." I turned and walked away before he could answer. My legs trembled from treatment, but my spine stayed straight. That evening, Brian called. "You must have rattled someone," he said. "Her lawyer just asked for a meeting." "What kind of meeting?" "A settlement discussion." My grip on the phone tightened. "Is it real this time?" "I think so," Brian said. "They know they're cornered." I stepped closer to the window, meeting his eyes. "Tell Vanessa she underestimated me." He shifted in his seat, lawyer mask cracking just a little. "I have records," I said quietly. "Bank transfers, texts, emails, her walking out the same day I got my diagnosis. That'll play real well in court. And if she pushes this, I will make sure every detail ends up in front of a judge." His mouth tightened. "You're bluffing. Try me." We stared at each other for a long second. Then he rolled the window back up and drove off without another word. Back home, Brian was already on the line. "He was there, wasn't he?" "Yep. Tried to scare me into a settlement. Thought I was too weak to fight." Brian chuckled. "Perfect. Let's give them a surprise." The next morning, we submitted our full financial report to the court. Land ownership, house equity, medical costs, the missing funds. Everything, neatly organized and time-stamped. 3 days later, Vanessa's lawyer folded. "Full withdrawal of all claims," Brian said, grinning. "You keep the house, the Mustang, and all inherited assets." They won it over. I sat down, exhausted and lightheaded, but a quiet sense of peace blooming inside me. "What now?" Ellie asked that night as she unpacked groceries. "Now," I said, "I just focus on getting better. And maybe start over." Brian nodded. "It flips the narrative. You're not defending, you're prosecuting. And with this evidence, we're in a strong position." I looked at the stack of documents on the table. Every betrayal, every lie, every selfish choice, organized, time-stamped, undeniable. "And if she fights it?" I asked. "She won't," Catherine said confidently. "Not with this kind of exposure. She'll settle, quietly, quickly." I signed the paperwork. That night, I sat alone in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of the neighborhood. My body ached, my spirit less so. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some control again. Ellie called to check in. "You good?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "Finally. You sound better." "I'm tired, but not defeated." "You never were." I smiled. For the first time, I believed her. Would you like me to continue with Vanessa's reaction and the final outcome in court? Or wrap the story with a peaceful ending that shows Logan rebuilding his life? Monday morning, I walked into the law office, feeling the weight of the past few months lift from my shoulders. Vanessa's lawyer and her father were already seated, their faces grim. I could tell they weren't expecting this level of force. Catherine and Brian sat beside me, confident, calm. I was done with being the one to retreat, the one who had to play nice. This wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up for what I deserved, what she had taken from me. Vanessa's lawyer opened the meeting. "We understand you're upset, Logan, but this approach is—" "Let's cut to the chase," I interrupted. "I'm done with the apologies. I want what's mine." Catherine slid the documents across the table. "Here's the evidence. Her theft, her abandonment, her deceit. The court will see it all. Let's make this quick." Vanessa's father shifted uncomfortably. "We're willing to settle," he said, but his tone wasn't confident. He was losing control, and he knew it. "Then let's talk terms," Brian said, taking charge. Over the next hour, we negotiated. Vanessa's lawyer fought hard, but with every piece of evidence we presented, their resistance crumbled. By the end, they had no choice but to agree to a settlement. Vanessa would lose half of what she thought she was entitled to. She would be ordered to repay the money she had taken, and I would keep everything I had worked for, including the house, the Mustang, and all the equity we had built together. After the meeting, I sat quietly in the car, watching the world go by. It was over. Not just the legal battle, but the emotional one too. I had taken back control. I had won, and I didn't even need to go to court to do it. Later that night, I sat down with Ellie. I didn't need to say much. She already knew. We'd been through enough together. "You did it," she said softly, smiling. "Yeah," I said. "I did." It was a bittersweet victory. I had lost my marriage, but I had gained something more important: my dignity, my peace of mind, and, slowly, my health was improving. As I leaned back in my chair, I felt the weight of the past few months fall off my shoulders. The road ahead would still be difficult, but I could see the horizon now, clear and full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to walk toward it. The room grew tense, the air thick with unspoken tension. Vanessa's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, clearly taken aback by Catherine's directness. Vanessa's father remained stoic, but I could see the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "That's a serious accusation," the lawyer said, glancing at Vanessa, who now looked down at her hands, clearly avoiding my gaze. Catherine didn't flinch. "It's not an accusation, it's the truth. And we've got the evidence to back it up. We have witness statements, bank records, text messages. Your client's actions are crystal clear. She has no grounds for anything beyond a full settlement to rectify the damage she's caused." Brian added, his voice cold. "This isn't a game. The court will see her for what she is. Someone who took advantage of a sick man, someone who tried to hide assets to avoid responsibility. If this goes to trial, it will be ugly, and no one will come out unscathed." Vanessa's lawyer opened his mouth to respond, but Catherine cut him off. "Let's be clear," she said. "We're prepared for trial. But if your client wants to settle, she needs to come to the table with something reasonable. And by reasonable, I mean a fair division of assets, including the funds she took, and an acknowledgement of the harm she caused." Vanessa finally looked up, her eyes flicking between me and the others in the room. There was a mix of frustration and guilt on her face, but also a clear sense of entitlement. She wasn't ready to back down. "We have options," Vanessa said, her voice more confident than it had been over the past few weeks. "We can settle, but I won't be bullied into giving up everything. I'm entitled to something." "You're entitled to nothing but what's fair," Catherine said, her tone firm. "And the longer you drag this out, the more it will cost you. Financially, emotionally, and reputationally." The room fell into a heavy silence. Vanessa's father leaned forward, whispering something to her lawyer. Vanessa's face tightened, and she looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "I don't need to be here for this," she said coldly, standing up abruptly. "I'll let my lawyer handle it, but I want it on record that I'm still willing to negotiate." Without waiting for a response, she stormed out of the room, leaving her father and lawyer to pick up the pieces of her hasty exit. Her lawyer turned to Catherine. "We'll take this under advisement, but don't expect any major changes unless your client is willing to reconsider his position." Catherine didn't give an inch. "We'll see you in court then," We're not going to back down." As Vanessa's lawyer left, Brian leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. Well, that was a little more dramatic than I expected. I didn't say anything. My heart was pounding, the adrenaline still surging through my body. The next steps would be difficult, but I wasn't going to let her walk away with anything she didn't deserve. "Are you okay?" Catherine asked, her voice softer now that the tension in the room had subsided. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. Let's just get this over with." Brian gave me an approving look. "You're stronger than you think, Logan. We're almost there." As the meeting ended, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally starting to take back control. Vanessa had underestimated me, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. Over the next hour, we negotiated. Vanessa's lawyer fought hard, but with every piece of evidence we presented, their resistance crumbled. By the end, they had no choice but to agree to a settlement. Vanessa would lose half of what she thought she was entitled to. She would be ordered to repay the money she had taken, and I would keep everything I had worked for, including the house, the Mustang, and all the equity we had built together. After the meeting, I sat quietly in the car, watching the world go by. It was over. Not just the legal battle, but the emotional one too. I had taken back control. I had won, and I didn't even need to go to court to do it. Later that night, I sat down with Ellie. I didn't need to say much. She already knew. We'd been through enough together. "You did it," she said softly, smiling. "Yeah," I said. "I did." It was a bittersweet victory. I had lost my marriage, but I had gained something more important. My dignity, my peace of mind, and, slowly, my health was improving. As I leaned back in my chair, I felt the weight of the past few months fall off my shoulders. The road ahead would still be difficult, but I could see the horizon now, clear and full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to walk toward it. The room grew tense, the air thick with unspoken tension. Vanessa's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, clearly taken aback by Catherine's directness. Vanessa's father remained stoic, but I could see the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "That's a serious accusation," the lawyer said, glancing at Vanessa, who now looked down at her hands, clearly avoiding my gaze. Catherine didn't flinch. "It's not an accusation, it's the truth. And we've got the evidence to back it up. We have witness statements, bank records, text messages. Your client's actions are crystal clear. She has no grounds for anything beyond a full settlement to rectify the damage she's caused." Brian added, his voice cold. "This isn't a game. The court will see her for what she is. Someone who took advantage of a sick man, someone who tried to hide assets to avoid responsibility. If this goes to trial, it will be ugly, and no one will come out unscathed." Vanessa's lawyer opened his mouth to respond, but Catherine cut him off. "Let's be clear," she said. "We're prepared for trial. But if your client wants to settle, she needs to come to the table with something reasonable. And by reasonable, I mean a fair division of assets, including the funds she took, and an acknowledgement of the harm she caused." Vanessa finally looked up, her eyes flicking between me and the others in the room. There was a mix of frustration and guilt on her face, but also a clear sense of entitlement. She wasn't ready to back down. "We have options," Vanessa said, her voice more confident than it had been over the past few weeks. "We can settle, but I won't be bullied into giving up everything. I'm entitled to something." "You're entitled to nothing but what's fair," Catherine said, her tone firm. "And the longer you drag this out, the more it will cost you. Financially, emotionally, and reputationally." The room fell into a heavy silence. Vanessa's father leaned forward, whispering something to her lawyer. Vanessa's face tightened, and she looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "I don't need to be here for this," she said coldly, standing up abruptly. "I'll let my lawyer handle it, but I want it on record that I'm still willing to negotiate." Without waiting for a response, she stormed out of the room, leaving her father and lawyer to pick up the pieces of her hasty exit. Her lawyer turned to Catherine. We'll take this under advisement, but don't expect any major changes unless your client is willing to reconsider his position. Catherine didn't give an inch. We'll see you in court then. We're not going to back down. As Vanessa's lawyer left, Brian leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. Well, that was a little more dramatic than I expected. I didn't say anything. My heart was pounding, the adrenaline still surging through my body. The next steps would be difficult, but I wasn't going to let her walk away with anything she didn't deserve. "Are you okay?" Catherine asked, her voice softer now that the tension in the room had subsided. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. Let's just get this over with." Brian gave me an approving look. "You're stronger than you think, Logan. We're almost there." As the meeting ended, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally starting to take back control. Vanessa had underestimated me, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. We walked out of the building, the weight of the past few hours pressing down on me. The air felt heavy, but also oddly freeing. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a sense of control. Vanessa had pushed me into a corner, but now, with everything laid bare, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Brian and I walked down the street toward the car, the sound of our footsteps filling the silence. I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. The battle wasn't over yet, but it felt like we were finally on the right track. As we reached the car, Brian turned to me. "You held your ground in there. This is about more than just money, right? It's about making sure she doesn't walk away without consequences." I nodded. "It's about more than just the money. It's about showing her that there are consequences for what she did. She can't just walk all over me because I'm sick, and she can't use people, especially her own family, to cover up her actions." Brian opened the door, and I got in, the cool leather seat feeling like a small comfort after the tension of the meeting. The ride back was quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I had a lot on my mind, and I knew there was still more to come. When we got back to my place, Brian gave me a final look before heading out. "Rest up, Logan. I have a feeling this is just the beginning, but you're handling it better than anyone could have hoped." I gave him a tired smile. "Thanks, Brian. I couldn't do it without you." As the door closed behind him, I sat down on the couch, my mind racing through everything that had happened. Vanessa's father, her lawyer, the check records, the terms we had laid out. Everything was in motion. I didn't know how this was going to play out, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I grabbed my phone to check for any updates. There was a new text message, but it wasn't from Vanessa. It was from Brian. "They'll fold. Just a matter of time now. Stay strong." I exhaled, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. Maybe this was the turning point. Maybe things were going to be okay after all. But whatever happened next, I knew I wasn't fighting alone. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders, but also the strange emptiness of something irrevocable being gone. The relief was there, yes, but it was mixed with a sense of finality I hadn't fully anticipated. I didn't feel victorious, just exhausted. I had won, sure, but the cost of it all had been far greater than I could have imagined when this whole mess began. The last few months of my life had been consumed with illness, betrayal, and now the aftermath of a marriage I once believed in. The sense of closure wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. It was quieter, more subdued. I stood by the window, staring out at the world, unsure of what my next steps would be. The treatments had been brutal, but I was still here. I had survived, and so had my dignity, but I was still missing something, or maybe someone. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Brian. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I let out a long breath. "I'm okay, I guess. It's done, but it doesn't feel like what I expected, you know?" Brian was quiet for a moment. "I get it. It's a lot more complicated than just signing papers and moving on. But you did it. You stood up for yourself when you didn't have to." "Yeah," I said, looking out at the horizon. "I did. And for the first time in a long time, I think I'm starting to feel like I might be okay. Good, Brian said, his voice soft but steady. You deserve that. But take it slow. This is a big shift, and you don't have to do it all at once. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Thanks, Brian. I don't think I could have done any of this without you. Anytime, he said. Just don't forget, you've got people who've got your back. You're not alone. I hung up the phone, staring at the walls of my apartment. For the first time, they didn't feel as empty. I had survived a storm, and now I needed to figure out how to rebuild. And so, life would go on. But it would be different. There would be a new beginning, even if it felt like the end of something else. What do you think Logan's next step will be after this resolution? Would you like to explore how he finds peace with this new chapter of his life, or something else entirely? Brian didn't push me further on the Mustang. He knew how much that car had meant to me, even though it had been a symbol of a time and a life that felt far away now. I could still remember the way I used to race it down quiet streets, the wind whipping through my hair. It wasn't just a car. It was freedom. We walked out of Catherine's office and into the street, the sun bright overhead, yet it felt like everything was happening in slow motion. I wasn't sure where to go from here, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. As the weeks passed, I focused on finishing my treatments. I could feel my strength returning bit by bit, though the side effects were still there. My body was changing in ways that were both unfamiliar and deeply personal. I had to relearn how to live in my own skin. Ellie continued her weekend visits, her presence like a small but steady anchor in a sea of change. Sometimes we'd sit in silence, watching old movies or talking about anything that came to mind. But other times, we'd talk about the future, my future. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't seem quite so uncertain. I had spent so much time reacting to the things happening around me, trying to fix everything that had fallen apart. Now, I was beginning to think about what I wanted, what I could want, after everything was said and done. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Ellie, she turned to me, her expression thoughtful. You know, she said slowly, you don't have to rush into anything. You've been through a lot. Take your time. I smiled, appreciating the way she always seemed to understand me, even when I didn't understand myself. I think I need to take my time, I said, my voice quiet but certain, and figure out what comes next. I'm not sure yet, but I know I'm not in a rush to close any doors. Ellie nodded. Good. Just make sure the next chapter is yours, not anyone else's. I thought about that for a long time. She was right. The next chapter had to be something I chose, something I built for myself. Not out of spite, not out of fear, but out of hope. Hope that I could still make something beautiful out of the mess that had been left behind. And as I looked out at the horizon, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to live again. The first call was to Ellie. I knew she'd be waiting for the news, her quiet support always a source of strength for me. When she picked up, I didn't say anything at first. I just let the silence hang for a moment, letting the weight of the words I was about to say sink in. Ellie, I finally said, my voice thick with emotion, I'm in remission. There was a pause on the other end, and then, almost too softly, I heard her say, Logan, that's amazing. Her voice cracked, and I could almost hear the relief in her words. I knew you could do it. I couldn't have done it without you, I replied. I'll always be grateful for how you stood by me. We stayed on the phone for a while longer, just talking. It felt good to share this victory with someone who had been there through the hardest of times. The second call was to my old friend, Sam. We hadn't talked much since the diagnosis. He had his own life to manage, and I was focused on surviving. But I knew this was a call I had to make. When he answered, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I'm in remission, Sam, I said, the words feeling lighter now. It's official. I made it. He was quiet for a moment, then laughed softly. You always were a fighter, Logan. I'm glad I was wrong about you. That last part made me chuckle too. Sam had always been the pessimist. He had predicted I'd never make it out of the hospital. But here I was. A little worse for wear, but alive. You've got to come visit, I said. We need to catch up properly. I'll be there soon, he promised. That night, as I sat on the back deck again, the sun dipping below the horizon, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It was strange. Like the weight of everything had been lifted just enough for me to breathe freely. I didn't know what was ahead, but for the first time, I wasn't scared of it. I was ready to face whatever came next, whether it was rebuilding my life, finding new purpose, or simply living. The future was mine to shape. First, I called Ellie, who screamed with joy. Then I reached out to my buddy Joel in Missoula, who'd been offering me a job at his custom auto shop for years. Still got space for me? I asked. Hell yes, he said. When can you start? A month later, I sold the house in Spokane. Used the money to buy a small cabin outside Missoula. 2 bedrooms, a garage big enough for my tools and the Mustang, and mountains visible from every window. The day I left Spokane, Tim and Lisa from next door came to say goodbye. Lisa handed me a casserole for the road. I thanked them for everything, the meals, the lawn mowing, the quiet support when I needed it most. You doing okay? Tim asked. Really okay? I thought about it for a moment. Getting there? 3 months into my new life in Montana, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Vanessa again. I heard you're in remission. I'm glad. I know you won't believe this, but I think about you often. I made a terrible mistake. I was scared and selfish. I'm sorry, Logan, for everything. I read it twice, considering whether to respond. But in the end, I typed back just 4 words. I survived. Be well. Then I blocked the number, put my phone away, and walked out to the garage. Not to sell the Mustang, but to restore it again, this time just for me. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed, but others can be rebuilt, stronger than before. I was one of them.